never meant to go back into that house. I told myself the memories had faded, that whatever I felt, there was just a child's fear clinging to old walls. But fear doesn't fade. It waits. And when I stepped inside again, the house recognized me. The air was wrong the moment the door closed behind me. Not cold, not warm. Stale, like breath trapped in a chest that refuses to exhale. The hallway seemed narrower than I remembered, the walls leaning inward, listening. My footsteps sounded muted, as if the floor was swallowing the noise to keep me quiet. The basement door was still there at the end of the corridor. The paint had peeled into pale curls, exposing dark wood beneath, scarred by marks that hadn't been there before. Long grooves ran across the surface, deep enough to catch my fingers. I didn't touch them. I already knew what they felt like. When I opened the door, a smell rose from below. Wet earth, old iron, and something sweet that didn't belong in any living place. The stairs descended into a thickness that swallowed the light. Each step down felt like leaving a part of myself behind. The silence pressed against my ears until I could hear my own blood moving. Halfway down, the house sighed. Not the wind, the house. I stopped. The sound came again, closer this time, a slow pull of air drawn from the dark below. With it came a soft scrape, like skin against stone. My body understood the warning before my mind did. I wanted to turn back, but the stairs behind me no longer looked like stairs. They stretched upward too far, bending slightly, as if the house had lengthened them while I wasn't looking. At the bottom, the narrow door waited. It was smaller than it should have been, set into the concrete like a wound that refused to close. The boards across it were newer, but the marks in the wood were deeper, layered over older scars. Something had been patient. Something had been trying for a long time. A sound came from the other side. Not a voice, the shape of one. It spoke without words, pressing meaning into the air. I felt it inside my head, arranging my thoughts into sentences I didn't want to finish. It knew where I had gone. It knew who I had lost. It knew the quiet places inside me that still wanted to be answered. The door flexed. Just slightly. The boards creaked, not with strain, but with relief, as if they were tired of holding. I raised my hand before I realized what I was doing. The wood was warm, too warm, and beneath that warmth, something shifted to meet me. The pressure on the other side wasn't a hand. It explored the shape of my palm, learning the spaces between my fingers, the lines that made me who I was. With that touch came images. Me standing in the hallway while the house emptied itself of everyone else, room by room, until I was the only thing left it could speak to. I pulled away, and the house seemed to tighten around me, walls drawing closer, breath thickening. I don't remember reaching the door. I only remember being outside, gasping, the air burning my lungs as if I'd been holding my breath for too long. The house was sold. The basement was sealed. People lived there now. But that wasn't the end of it. For a long time after, I began to notice small changes in places I thought were safe. Doors in my own home would feel warm when I touched them. Walls would carry that same stale breath. In quiet rooms, I could sense a shape pressing from the other side, not visible, but present, testing the boundaries of wood, of plaster, of me. I started dreaming of narrow spaces, of doors set into places that shouldn't have doors. In the dreams, I was always standing on one side, and something patient stood on the other, learning the rhythm of my breathing, waiting for me to grow tired of being alone. Sometimes I wake with my hand raised, inches from my bedroom wall, as if I've been trying to touch something through it. The skin of my palm will be warm. My fingers will ache as though they've been pressed against a surface for too long. I've learned not to answer when the house feels like it's listening. I've learned to keep my hands to myself, because whatever is on the other side of that door doesn't need to chase you. It only needs you to remember how to reach for it. I didn't notice it all at once. There wasn't a single night I could point to and say, that's when everything changed. It started with something so small that even now I feel ridiculous saying it out loud. My reflection began to arrive late. Not late in any dramatic way, not like a glitch in a movie, just delayed. A fraction of a second behind my movements. The kind of delay your brain can register but can't quite prove. At first, I blamed myself. I was tired. I worked long hours. I spent too much time staring at screens. Anyone who's ever gone too long without proper sleep knows how the world can feel slightly off. So when I noticed the delay for the first time, I laughed it off and moved on. It happened one morning while I was shaving. I tilted my head to the left, and my reflection followed a heartbeat later. Not enough to be obvious. Just enough to make my stomach tighten for no clear reason. I stood there for a second, razor hovering near my skin, staring into my own eyes. Everything looked normal. The same face I'd had my whole life. The same small scar on my cheek. The same tired expression. I shook my head and finished getting ready for work. But once you notice something like that, you don't stop noticing it. Over the next few days, I found myself testing the mirror without meaning to. Quick movements, raising my hand suddenly, tilting my head, blinking on purpose. Every time the reflection followed. And every time there was that tiny delay. It wasn't consistent. Sometimes it was almost perfectly synchronized. Other times it lagged just enough to feel wrong, like watching a badly dubbed movie where the actor's lips don't quite match the sound. The bathroom was small, one sink, one cracked tile near the drain, a mirror that had been there long before I moved in. It wasn't antique or decorative, just a plain mirror bolted into the wall. I'd never had any reason to think about it before. Now, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I told myself I was being paranoid, that mirrors don't lag, that reflections don't have timing issues, that my eyes were playing tricks on me. Still, I started avoiding looking at myself for too long. There's a specific kind of discomfort that comes from realizing something familiar isn't behaving the way it should. Not fear exactly, more like distrust. Like when you grab a door handle you've touched 1,000 times and one day it feels colder than it should. The object hasn't changed in any obvious way, but something about it suddenly feels wrong. One evening, after a long day, I went into the bathroom to wash my face. The light was too bright and my eyes burned as I leaned over the sink. Water splashed against the porcelain. I cupped my hands, rinsed my face, and felt the tension in my jaw slowly release. When I straightened up and looked at the mirror, my reflection was still dripping. I had already dried my face with a towel. The reflection hadn't. I froze. It wasn't dramatic. No music swelled, no sudden noise. Just a quiet, heavy moment where my brain refused to accept what my eyes were showing me. For a second, I thought maybe I was wrong. Maybe I hadn't dried my face properly. Maybe there was still water on my skin that I couldn't feel. But I lifted my hand and touched my cheek. Dry. In the mirror, my reflection's cheek was wet. Droplets of water slid slowly down its skin, following the curve of a face that was supposed to be mine. I felt a strange pressure behind my eyes, like the beginning of a headache. I leaned closer to the mirror. My reflection didn't move. Then, slowly, deliberately, it raised its hand. I did not. The reflected hand came up and rested against the glass, palm flat, fingers slightly spread. It was my hand. I recognized the small scar on the knuckle, the faint discoloration near the thumb. But it wasn't obeying me. I took a step back. The reflection didn't follow. We stood there like that, separated by a thin sheet of glass, staring at each other. There was no anger in its expression, no smile, no exaggerated horror movie grin, just curiosity. Like it was studying me the way I was studying it. I don't remember how long that moment lasted. Time does strange things when your mind is trying to protect you from something it can't explain. Eventually, my body reacted before my thoughts did. I turned away from the mirror and left the bathroom. I didn't run. I didn't scream. I just walked out and closed the door behind me with shaking hands. That night, I didn't sleep much. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet sounds of my apartment, the hum of distant traffic, the occasional creak of the building settling. Normal sounds, comforting sounds. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw my reflection's hand pressed against the glass. The next morning, I went back into the bathroom like nothing had happened. The mirror showed my reflection as it always had, perfectly synchronized, blink for blink, movement for movement. For a moment, I wondered if I'd imagined everything. That thought scared me almost as much as the alternative. Over the following weeks, the mirror went back to behaving normally, or at least normally enough that I couldn't prove anything was wrong. Still, I changed the way I moved in front of it. I avoided sudden gestures. I kept my eyes on my own eyes, afraid of what I might see if I looked too closely. There was a quiet fear underneath everything, not the loud, panicked kind, the slow kind, the kind that settles into your routine and changes the way you move through your own home. Then something worse happened. I started noticing that my reflection didn't just follow my movements. Sometimes it anticipated them. I would think about raising my hand, and the reflection's hand would lift a fraction of a second before mine did. I would lean forward, and the reflection would already be leaning toward me. It felt like standing in front of someone who knew what you were going to say before you opened your mouth. That's a uniquely unsettling feeling. It makes you question where your intentions come from, whether your choices are truly yours, or if you're just following a script you can't see. One night, I walked past the bathroom with the lights off. The apartment was dark, lit only by the faint glow from the street outside. As I passed the open door, I glanced toward the mirror. I saw a silhouette, someone standing there. My heart jumped into my throat. I knew I was alone. I hadn't heard the door open. I hadn't heard footsteps. I stopped in the hallway, barely breathing, staring into the darkness. The silhouette didn't move. I reached for the light switch and turned it on. The bathroom flooded with light. My reflection stood in the mirror, but it was smiling. I wasn't. I stared at that smile for a long time. It wasn't wide or exaggerated, just a subtle curve of the lips. The kind of smile you give when you know something the other person doesn't. That was the moment I covered the mirror. Not because I believed it was haunted, not because I suddenly became superstitious, because something about the relationship had changed. It no longer felt like a reflection, it felt like a presence. I draped a towel over the mirror and left it there. Days turned into weeks. The towel became just another part of the bathroom. Sometimes, late at night, I'd walk past the door and see the faint outline of the covered mirror in the darkness. And I'd get the strange impression that the towel was lifted slightly at the bottom, as if something on the other side was trying to see my feet, waiting for me to look back. I haven't uncovered the mirror since. Not because I'm afraid of what I'll see, but because I'm afraid of what might be waiting to see me. I never felt alone in that apartment, even though I lived by myself. It wasn't the normal sense of presence, the idea that someone might be in the next room. It was the certainty that something was moving where I couldn't see it. Not across the floor, inside the walls. At first the sounds were small, soft creaks that didn't match the rhythm of the building, faint scrapes that seemed to slide from one room to another. I told myself it was old pipes, trapped air, the usual noises of a tired structure. That excuse stopped working the night I heard my own breathing coming from the other side of the wall. I froze. I held my breath. The sound on the other side stopped too. I pressed my ear against the hallway wall. The surface felt warm, like it had been holding heat. I felt a subtle vibration beneath the plaster, a muffled murmur that couldn't quite become words. It was as if someone was practicing a voice inside the concrete. Over the following days, it learned. It learned when I went quiet. It learned where I chose to sit. The sounds no longer came from the wrong places. They followed me through the apartment, stopping just behind the newest wall. Sometimes I would wake up and find new hairline cracks spreading from the outlets, thin as pencil lines, as if the walls were being stretched from the inside. One night, the murmur finally shaped itself into something that resembled my name. It wasn't a clear whisper, more like a clumsy attempt, the way a mouth that has never spoken might try to remember how. I moved out soon after. I left the apartment empty and silent. But even now, in unfamiliar rooms, when I rest my head against a wall, I feel a faint vibration on the other side, like something is still practicing my name. If this story left you with that quiet, uncomfortable feeling, the kind that doesn't go away right away, then you understand why I tell these stories the way I do. These aren't stories meant to scare you with loud noises. They're meant to stay with you in the silence, to follow you when the lights go out, even if you can't quite explain why. If you want more stories like this, stories that don't rely on cheap jump scares, but on that slow, creeping unease that gets under your skin, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Here, I share unsettling real experiences and accounts people rarely say out loud. Stories that seem small at first, until you realize they could happen to you. Let me know in the comments if you've ever felt like something in your home wasn't quite right, even if you couldn't explain it. And if you're watching this late at night, take a moment to look around before you go to sleep. Sometimes the unsettling thing isn't hiding in the dark, Sometimes it was already there when you turned the light on,